"Sir, you're in a restricted area. Do you even know where you are?" The voice was sharp, laced with the brittle confidence of youth and authority. It came from a young airman no older than 20, who stood with his partner beside a gleaming security forces patrol vehicle. He had that impossibly crisp uniform, the posture of someone who had recently mastered the art of standing at attention, and an expression that hovered somewhere between boredom and annoyance. Patrick Donovan, 86 years old, did not turn to face him. He remained still, both hands resting on the smooth, worn head of his wooden cane, his gaze fixed on the machine in front of them. It was an F-4 Phantom II, a ghost of a bygone era, mounted on a concrete pedestal in the base's Heritage Park. Its paint was faded by decades of sun, but its lines were still aggressive, still beautiful. Patrick knew every line, every rivet. He could feel the phantom vibration of its twin engines in his bones. The second airman, his name tag reading Chen, shifted his weight. "Sir, my partner asked you a question. We need to see your ID." The first airman, Davis, took a step closer, his voice louder now, designed to attract attention. "This isn't a public park, Grandpa. You can't just wander in here." He gestured vaguely at the flight line, a quarter-mile away, where the sleek gray shapes of modern fighters shimmered in the heat. "This is an active military installation." Patrick finally turned his head. His eyes, pale blue and clouded with age, held a calmness that seemed to unnerve the young man. He offered no apology, no explanation. He simply looked at them, his silence a stark contrast to their agitated energy. This quiet dignity was a language they did not speak, and it only served to irritate Airman Davis further. He saw not a man but a problem to be solved, an obstacle in his otherwise predictable day. He saw an old man who was out of place, and he was the authority designated to put him back where he belonged. The confrontation had only just begun, but the disrespect was already a palpable thing, hanging in the dry afternoon air like exhaust fumes. Airman Davis's patience, a shallow commodity to begin with, was evaporating under the Texas sun. He unclipped the radio from his shoulder. "Dispatch, this is Sentry 2. We have a Code 1, an unauthorized civilian, at Heritage Park. Elderly male, non-compliant." The word non-compliant hung in the air. Patrick hadn't refused to do anything. He had simply not done it with the speed and deference the young airman expected. He slowly, deliberately reached into the back pocket of his worn trousers and pulled out a simple leather wallet. His movements were careful, methodical, the economy of motion learned by a body that understood its limits. "See, he's getting it," Airman Chen said, a note of relief in his voice. "Let's just see his ID and help him find his way, Davis." Davis ignored him. He stepped forward, crowding Patrick, his shadow falling over the old man. "Took you long enough. Let's see it." Patrick opened the wallet and produced a state-issued driver's license. The photo showed a man with the same pale eyes but with fewer lines mapping the terrain of his face. He handed it over. Davis glanced at it and scoffed. "Patrick Donovan, great. This gets you into a bar, not onto a secure military base. I need a DoD-issued identification card, a dependent ID, a retiree ID, something." Patrick met his gaze. "That's the only one I carry." "Then how did you get on my base?" Davis's voice was rising, accusatory. A small crowd was beginning to form. A few airmen heading to the dining hall slowed their pace, curious. A civilian contractor pushing a tool cart stopped a dozen yards away. The public nature of the questioning was a deliberate tool, a way to apply pressure, to humiliate. "The main gate sentry was very helpful," Patrick said, his voice even. "He recognized my vehicle's bumper sticker and waved me through. He said the commander had issued a standing invitation. This was, to Davis, an unbelievable lie. A bumper sticker? A standing invitation for some random old man? The absurdity of it fueled his aggression. A bumper sticker. Right. And I'm the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. You're lying to a federal officer, old man. That's a serious offense." He pushed the driver's license back at Patrick's chest. "You're coming with us." He reached out to take Patrick's arm. It was a practiced, firm grip, the kind they taught in training to control a subject. But the moment his fingers closed around the thin fabric of Patrick's jacket, something shifted in the old man's demeanor. The placid calmness in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of something ancient and hard, a glint of polished steel. "Son," Patrick's voice was low, but it cut through the air with newfound weight. "I'd advise you to take your hand off me." The quiet authority in that statement gave Davis a moment's pause. Chen took the opportunity to intervene. "Davis, hold on. Let's just call this in. We can have someone from visitor control come down." "Negative," Davis snapped, his authority challenged not just by the old man but by his own partner. His grip on Patrick's arm tightened. "This is a security issue. He's an unknown. He's lying, and he's refusing to cooperate. Standard procedure. He looked past Patrick, at the gathering onlookers, puffing his chest out. This was his show. He was the one maintaining order. He saw the small, worn leather pouch attached to Patrick's belt. It was old, the leather cracked, the stitching frayed. It looked out of place with the rest of his simple attire. "And what's in there?" Davis demanded, pointing at it with his free hand. "You're not allowed to carry unauthorized items on base. Let me see it." He reached for the pouch. The instant his fingers brushed against the aged leather, the world seemed to tilt for a moment. Not for Davis, but for Patrick. The roar of a nearby F-16 taking off blended and transformed into a different sound. The deep guttural thunder of two J-79 turbojet engines at full afterburner. The smell of hot asphalt and jet fuel was momentarily replaced by the acrid scent of cordite and ozone in a cramped, vibrating cockpit. For a split second, a vivid image flashed behind his eyes. A young man's hand covered in a stained flight glove clutching an identical leather pouch. The knuckles were white, the cockpit shaking violently around him as red tracer rounds stitched the sky. The vision was gone as quickly as it came. Patrick's free hand, the one holding his cane, moved with a speed that belied his age. It clamped down over Davis's wrist, covering the hand that was reaching for the pouch. His grip was surprisingly strong, the knuckles and sinews of his hand like knotted rope. His voice was no longer quiet. It was a low growl, a sound of absolute command that seemed to come from another man, another lifetime. "Don't touch that." The change was so sudden, so complete, that it stunned Davis into immobility. The onlookers murmured. Airman Chen took a step back, his eyes wide. The illusion of a frail, confused old man had been shattered. In his place stood someone else, someone whose presence filled the space with an unspoken and formidable power. Davis, caught in the grip of a man he had dismissed as feeble, could only stare, his own bravado faltering for the first time. Standing near the back of the growing crowd was Master Sergeant Eva Rostova. She was on her way to the First Sergeant's symposium, her mind preoccupied with budgets and personnel files. But the scene unfolding by the F-4 display had pulled her in. She was a career NCO, with 22 years of service under her belt. She had seen it all. Young hotshots high on their new authority, procedural corners being cut, and the quiet dignity of the generations who had come before her. She watched Airman Davis, her eyes narrowing at his unprofessionalism, his need to dominate the situation rather than resolve it. But it was the old man who held her attention. She saw his posture, the way he stood, even while leaning on a cane. There was an ingrained straightness to his spine. She saw the look in his eyes when Davis grabbed his arm. Not fear, not anger, but a flicker of profound disappointment, as if he were a king watching a court jester make a fool of himself. And when he spoke, when that low, commanding growl emerged, Rostova felt a chill run down her spine. That was a voice that had been forged in crisis. That was the voice of a leader. While Davis sputtered, trying to regain control, Rostova saw him reach for his handcuffs. That was the line. An octogenarian civilian posing no threat was about to be cuffed in the middle of the base for the crime of being slow and uncooperative with an arrogant airman. She knew this was a mistake that could ripple far beyond a simple security incident. Without a second thought, she turned, melting back into the crowd and stepping behind a large oak tree. She pulled out her cell phone, bypassing the security force's dispatch entirely. Going through the normal channels would be too slow, too bureaucratic. This required a higher intervention. She scrolled through her contacts and found the number for the Wing Command Chief's executive assistant, a senior master sergeant she knew from a joint committee. The phone was answered on the second ring. "Sergeant Miller, this is Master Sergeant Rostova. I'm over at Heritage Park." She kept her voice low but urgent. "We have a situation. A couple of your SF kids are detaining an elderly civilian." She could hear Miller's sigh on the other end. "Another one. Just have them escort him to the visitor's center, Eva." "The commander's in a briefing." "Sir, with respect, I don't think the visitor's center is the right answer," Rostova pressed, her eyes darting back to the scene. Davis now had one cuff on Patrick's wrist. "They're making a scene. The airman, Davis, is way over the line. But that's not the main issue. The man, they're treating him like a criminal." "What's his name?" Miller asked, his tone still routine. "He gave them a driver's license. The name is Patrick Donovan." Rostova paused, then added the crucial piece. "Sir, I know it's a long shot, and maybe I'm crazy, but that name, it's the same name on the dedication plaque for the F-4, the one they call the Phantom's Ghost." The silence on the other end of the line was immediate and absolute. For 5 long seconds, Rostova heard nothing but the faint hum of an office. Then Sergeant Miller's voice came back, and all traces of routine were gone. It was replaced by pure, unadulterated alarm. "Rostova, are you sure? It's the name on the ID, sir. Stay there. Do not let them take him anywhere. I'll handle it. The line went dead. Rostova knew the message had been received. The cavalry, in some form or another, was on its way. Justice was coming. She just hoped it would arrive before Airman Davis did something he could never take back. Inside the wing headquarters building, a sprawling brick structure known as the White House, Colonel David Matthews was in the middle of a tense video conference with the Pentagon. He was gesturing at a slide deck explaining logistical shortfalls when his command chief's executive, Senior Master Sergeant Miller, burst into the room without knocking, a catastrophic breach of protocol. "Sir, you need to see this," Miller said, his face pale. He didn't speak further, simply placed his phone on the polished mahogany table. It was open to a web page, a grainy photo at the top. Matthews shot him a look of pure fury. "Miller, what in God's name do you think you're—" He stopped mid-sentence as his eyes fell on the phone screen. It was a page from the base's own historical archives. The photo showed a young pilot in a flight suit, leaning against the nose of an F-4 Phantom, a cocky grin on his face. The headline read, "The Phantom's Ghost, the Legend of Colonel Patrick Donovan." Matthews's eyes flicked from the photo to the name, then back to Miller's terrified face. "What is this?" he demanded. "Security forces," Miller said, his voice barely a whisper. "They're detaining him, at his own monument." The blood drained from Colonel Matthews's face. The color of his skin went from a healthy tan to a sickly ashen gray. He stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. The Pentagon briefing, the logistical shortfalls, everything evaporated. There was only this colossal, unimaginable disaster. He slammed his hand down on the desk, cutting off a 4-star general mid-sentence on the screen. "This meeting is over," he barked at the monitor before snapping the laptop shut. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "Get me the security forces commander on the phone. Now, get my staff car to the front entrance. Tell them to run hot. Now," he roared. To his aide, he added, "They've got Patrick Donovan at the F-4 display."